Dustin Riechmann is, in his own words, an engineer who helps people with their marriages, sells meat sticks, and does business coaching. I just smile saying that because of just the diversity of Dustin's interests and successes. I first met Dustin in a group of business owners that we're both in. He just stood out to me because of that very approach, because he has his hands in a few things and he's doing them really successfully. It just felt like a kindred spirit of sorts. And not only that, but the things that he does with a mission, with a commitment, with a passion behind it that resonated with me because that's how I go about doing the things that I do. That's why the Meaning Movement, this very video or audio that you're watching or listening to, exists. As someone who has multiple businesses and a strong passion behind them, I'm always on the lookout for people who approach their work in a similar way, and Dustin does exactly that, which is a ton of fun in this interview. We talk about how he got to where he is and how he's found his passions along the way and continues to cultivate them. I went on after this to work with Dustin in his accelerator for this project, for the Meaning Movement. It's part of the many things that I'm doing to reshape and reform the Meaning Movement and take it to the next level. So he will continue to have a role in the future of the Meaning Movement beyond this very conversation. But let's go ahead and get into the conversation here today. This, of course, is the Meaning Movement podcast. Too often, high performers run on empty. We're here to help you create a clear path for reclaiming your life, your work, and relationships. That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Dan Cumberland. Today, with the guest, Dustin Riechmann. Stay with us. There's a big problem that's changing everything about the world as we know it. Carbon and the impact of humans on the earth. We talk about it with words like climate change and global warming. But there's just two really important things that you need to know about it. First, this is an overwhelmingly big problem. So much so that it's likely that you feel as though your choices don't matter in the face of it. Second, that overwhelming feeling that I just mentioned, it's intentional. It was put there by design. The industries that make the biggest environmental impact have a vested interest in you feeling overwhelmed and powerless. They've marketed, lobbied, and schemed to create that feeling in all of us. In short, we've been lied to. But here's the good news. There's a lot you can do to make a difference. And the other good news is that there's still time. The Carbon Almanac is a book and project about these problems and what we can do to solve them. It was created and run by volunteers on the premise that it's not too late, but none of us can fix this problem on our own. We need each other. There are many ways to get involved, but simply learning more is a great start. Here are 3 steps you can take. First, go to thecarbonalmanac.org and sign up for the Daily Difference emails. They give you a short thought and a practical action that you can take alongside thousands of others every day. Second, get the Carbon Almanac book. It's full of facts, articles, graphs, and art. It's beautiful and fun to engage with. It's all footnoted and fact-checked. And importantly, it's made by volunteers whose only agenda is to solve these systemic issues. You can find it wherever books are sold. Finally, since you're listening to a podcast, search for the Carbon Almanac wherever you're listening. You'll find the Carbon Almanac Podcast Network and a few shows featuring expert insight, discussion, inspiration, and ways to take action. There's even a show just for kids. Do what appeals to you. Just do something. There's still time to make a huge difference in the future of the planet, but we can't solve this on our own. Join us. Dustin, so excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the Meaning Movement podcast. So great to have you here.
I'm very excited to be here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
The question I like to begin with is, how do you begin to talk about the work that you do?
So my tongue-in-cheek answer is I'm an engineer who helps people with their marriages, sells meat sticks, and does business coaching, because that kind of encompasses my entrepreneurial and professional journey.
I love that. Let's unpack those. Can you go through those one at a time and tell listeners, what each of those what that means?
Yeah, for sure. And I hope people can relate, because I know a lot of your listeners are either in transition, they're coming out of a transition, they're thinking about a transition. I've had multiple in my adult life.
Or doing multiple things, right?
Or doing many of them at the same time as well.
Yeah.
So my professional life started as an engineer. So I had a master's degree in engineering and had a specialty in traffic engineering. So I got pretty niche and did that for 18 years. But through a lot of that time, I also had side hustles and other projects because I had an entrepreneurial bug or a scratch that I wanted to itch that I wanted to scratch, I guess is the right way to say that. But my very first online project was called Engaged Marriage, and it still exists today. It's engagedmarriage.com. And that really grew out of my wife and I's marriage ministry work that we were doing through our church. So early in our marriage, we were invited to help host workshops and retreats and come up with instructional materials and things like that. We were doing it in dark church basements. So this was in 2009, kind of the heyday of blogging and online journaling and things like that. So I really just wanted to create a project. So I Googled and figured out how to create a website, made a website, and was basically chronicling our life and the things that we were seeing with other couples. And so that evolved over time into an information product business. So we have a bunch of digital courses. We have a membership site there. We have some flagship training. We wrote a book. We've done speaking. So we kind of did all of those things while being an engineer from 2009 to present. That also brought me over into the world of digital marketing. So that's where, I'd say the mid 2014, 15, I was taking time off of work to go to learn digital marketing and go to conferences and things like that. But I was still doing both. And that though was my bridge out of the 9-to-5 sort of corporate engineering role. So in 2017 is when I decided to leave that as the sole breadwinner of a family with 3 children. My wife was staying at home at the time. And so I'm sure we can unpack that because there's probably people in similar situations. But I did ultimately, through a lot of consternation and a lot of hard work, made that leap. So I started in 2018 completely self-employed. And I was doing marketing consulting, basically online and local businesses, basically just doing digital marketing for people with the skills I had learned throughout running my own business and some other side hustles. So the meat sticks come in in 2018 because one of my clients was a local butcher shop, and they had multiple locations, and I was helping them, drive traffic and get and do strategy around their offers and things like that to bring more people in the door. And it went really well. And the 3rd generation owner of that company was about my age and similar family and similar values. And we just kind of hit it off. And he said, hey, I'm coming out of this partnership. I've got this other brand. It's called Fire Creek Snacks. And I'd really like to bring it online. He'd really just been trying to do retail and sell locally. And I said, I could try that. I'd never done e-commerce per se, but I could do that. So I built a Shopify store and we started marketing that. Ultimately, that led into a business partnership. And so I'm still a partner in that business. I'm basically the head of sales and marketing for Fire Creek Snacks, and learned a ton over the years about all that's entailed in a physical product business. And part of the way I grew that, it's kind of become my go-to and what I'm known for really in digital marketing is what I call partnership marketing. So basically leveraging other people's audiences, adding value to them, and in turn, improving our own business. So that's Fire Creek Snacks kind of took me out in the public, a lot of podcast guesting, subscription box partnerships, joint, ventures and brand collaborations, all that kind of stuff. But think about other people's platforms that we were able to get Fire Creek onto at no cost. So, we were able to get to 7 figures in revenue without any paid ads, which is pretty unusual for an e-commerce company, especially. And in doing that in public, I started having a lot of people reaching out to me and asking me about strategy and coaching, consulting. So I basically grew what I was now my primary business, Simple Success Coaching, out of growing Fire Creek in public is the way I would describe that. I've never done any marketing for that business. It's just all relational, and it's all through partnerships and collaborations and doing good work in public and attracting people that have similar values. So that was a very long answer to what I do.
But fantastic.
Hopefully people can kind of see the dots in reverse. That's the only way I could describe it. I could never have foreseen where I am today based on my education and where I started. But there's a lot of commonalities and reasons these transitions worked that I'm happy to unpack with you.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic overview. Thank you for that. And so much of it, and I think this is why you and I initially connected. Is it just feels like we're on parallel journeys in a lot of ways. Maybe your timelines are pretty similar in a lot of ways too. That started just figuring out as you went, and then that brought opportunity, and that opened doors, and you gathered skills, and then applied those skills to make new things happen, which is just really exciting. Did you ever? I know you. I guess just to rewind to when you were a traffic engineer, did you always going into that, like, did you ever dream about, I know you said you had an entrepreneurial itch, but like, did you imagine yourself just being a traffic engineer your entire career and then just retiring or something? Like what did the plan look like for whatever
Yeah.
plan, quote unquote plan? We're all figuring it out as we go, but I'm just curious, like, just to get in your brain, 18 plus years ago, like
Mhm.
what that was like.
Yeah, so for me, it was I didn't even know what entrepreneur meant growing up. I had no examples of that, and so I was very poor. My dad was an alcoholic and a lot of abuse issues, and so I mean, I had no concept of having money. I was very, very, very heavily in a scarcity mindset because it's all I knew. However, I was very blessed and was gifted academically, and so I was given the opportunity to have a full scholarship to college to go to engineering school. So that to me was the only path, right? Like my dad was a laborer, so he basically did construction work, and I admired those projects, and I was like, "This is really cool, building bridges," but I didn't want to be the guy out there, pouring the asphalt like he was in a very
Yeah.
inconsistent way. I wanted to be the guy wearing khakis on the side who was directing things. So that was kind of my foray into why civil engineering. I think it was just I was exposed to cool projects, and I really got into those kind of massive civil engineering projects. So that brought me to that path. And then again, I had the opportunity to go to school. And so my plan was basically to be an engineer forever because that's all I really knew. And my wife was a teacher, a special ed teacher, and her family structure was very much like 9 to 5. Let's have a normal job, a normal life. We'll do a retirement thing. So that's what I expected to do. And in my engineering career in the early years, I went back and at night and did my master's and got licensed in various ways and all that stuff. So everything was geared up towards that. So I only learned as I was progressing through my career that, hey, people have like other businesses, they have businesses online, this idea of like scaling or like having my business be around my lifestyle instead of having to work. I was working 50, 60-hour weeks often, and I got into management roles and realized I really hated that. And so it kind of like everything came to a head when I had a mix of like exposure to other ideas, this whole online opportunity that was emerging in the 2000s, and my own kind of personal pain of like, I really don't like what I'm doing day to day anymore. There's got to be something else for me. So yeah, so I didn't really have a plan, but the
Yeah.
plan has continued to emerge. Like one step, as I take a step, there's like another step that appears, and I'm still on that emerging path, I'd say.
I love that. I love that. I'm curious, just with that in mind. I'm usually is the question I ask later on, but it just since we're kind of focused on that piece, the lack of a plan, just what recommendations would you give to people who are especially early in their career and they're trying to think about where their career might go and what they want based on your personal experience? Of course, like we know that like because the way it works for one person doesn't necessarily work for everybody. But I'm just curious if you have any, like, just want to speak to the audience directly around, how do you plan a career?
Yeah, I would say be curious. Number one, if you think you might like something, get around it, like get exposed to it, whether it be an internship or hey, can I shadow you for free? Can I work for you for free? I've had quite a few people like hear me the Fire Creek story and they reach out and they're either a senior or they're getting ready to graduate and they'll do like a 3 month internship with me online, virtual.
I love it.
And I really encourage that because they get to see what e-commerce is really like. They get to
Yeah.
maybe shadow me on a Zoom call if we're, having a sales call or something like that. And I very much encourage that from people. So trying to get around it. I would say the number one piece of advice that I give all entrepreneurs or all people, but especially younger people, is the idea that many of these choices that we make are not permanent decisions. So I would say I stuck around engineering probably 5 years longer than I should have because it was a mix of it was my identity. I was the sole breadwinner. There's a lot of like practical reasons not to do it.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing was this fear that like once I do this, I'm screwed. Like if this doesn't work, like it's over. And that's really what I felt. And so in the
Yeah.
middle of 2017, I kind of had this epiphany moment where I was like, you know what? I could leave and I could like come back. Like if I go do what I want to do for
Yeah.
6 months and it doesn't work very well, I can probably come back to the exact same job. I'm not leaving because I'm bad at it. I'm choosing. So I think that's it. Like there's a few like permanent decisions in life, having children, hopefully marriage, maybe a religious vocation. almost nothing though is a permanent decision. So I think
Yeah.
if people are thinking about that career path and they're really curious to try something new, like just go try it. Like give yourself a plan. So say 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you're going to commit to doing this. It may or may not work, but then you don't have the regret of like, oh man, I really wish I would have tried that. I let myself be too fearful and didn't go out and try something new.
I love that. That's so applicable and just rings true, my experience. And I think, sounds like a big part of yours is like just the willingness to just get your hands dirty and uh jumping into creating an online course with no idea how to do that. I mean, that's literally how we got here, right? That we're having this conversation because I started this podcast with no idea of how to start a podcast 6 years ago, and then you started your thing, and then somehow we connected years and years later.
Yeah,
Which I think,
absolutely.
for folks listening, hopefully that's another lesson along the way is like just jump and don't quit the job too early, but try stuff. Just try stuff and see what happens. You never know what will come of that.
Yeah, and you can try it with the plans. So like I said, it was the middle of 2017. I'm like, man, I got to give this a shot. So what I did was communicated really openly with my wife and with my kids. And was like, the next 6 months are going to be tough. Like, you think I work a lot? I'm going to be working a lot more. Like, basically, I'm going to do this 6 month like double full time thing where I'm taking on marketing consulting gigs while I'm still working my engineering job.
Yep.
So that January 1st. We can make this dramatic change, and it allowed us time to figure out insurance and all the practical concerns of doing that. So I guess I'm saying to advocate, I'm not advocating like just screw it, jump ship and do something new tomorrow, but like make a plan and have a plan that you can follow and have goals that are very concrete, and timelines that are very concrete, because otherwise we all will inevitably be like, man, someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to do that. And unless you put a time frame on it and commit to it, it won't happen, right? So, and I think we can all think of personal examples that we maybe wish we would have tried something and we just didn't assign definition to it.
Yeah. When you actually quit, I know you said that it you may have stayed a few years too long. Like I don't know, scale of 0 to 10, how scary was that moment for you?
The quitting moment, I would say it was like, I think it was in my mind it was going to be a 10. It turned out to be like a 4. Yeah. I was scared to actually tell my supervisor. Like the actual meeting was super awkward. But actually what ended up happening is they're like, hey, could you stick around on a part-time basis and basically help find and train your replacement? And they paid me like a really good rate to do that. And so it became a very soft landing, but I thought they were going to say, get out of here, we hate you, and it wasn't like that at all. So it actually ended up not being that bad at all, but it was very scary in my mind leading up to that moment.
I love it. I always think it's fascinating how much fear is a mind game. Like that. We fear, like our fear of the thing is so much more painful than the actual event.
100%. Like, yeah, and you keep playing over and over in your mind. And actually what happened, my boss was, so I was building one of the many things I was doing at that time was building websites for people because it's a skill I had acquired. And he's like, well, I'm part of this engineers club. Like, we need a new website. You want to do it for us? And so like he became one of my first marketing clients. And it was from my actual engineering boss. So they were very supportive. But yeah, in my mind, I thought, man, I'm just gonna ostracise everyone. I'm gonna lose my identity. People are gonna think I'm a complete idiot throwing away a great career. And it wasn't like that. So.
Yeah, that's so great. So I want to talk about marketing consulting and like just kind of unpack that. What all does that include? Because it's like marketing consulting, those two words together they have like it's almost like they don't have any meaning to people who aren't in the world. Like, what does that look like day to day?
Well, back when I was doing it in kind of part time, and then that first full year of self-employment, it was basically taking anything anyone wanted. So like my dentist, my dentist became a client. My real estate broker became a client. My sister-in-law had a restaurant. So I built websites for all those guys. I was doing Facebook ads. I would come in and consult with them and come up with offers. Like that kind of became one of my go-to things, is like compelling offers, both from a dentist and like an online course creator, And so now I'm very happy I did all that stuff. It was very scattered as far as not being very good use of my time or very scalable, but I touched literally probably every industry, whether it's my own business or clients. And
Yeah.
that's really helpful. It's like be able to think about how this dentist did something and think about how that applies to someone's like online coaching business.
Yep.
They're not really like the same vertical at all, but there's some really cool lessons learned from different industries. What it looks like today is much more focused on what I referred to earlier, which is partnership marketing. So I still don't really
Yeah.
operate in a particular vertical, but it's almost all online businesses, and it's almost all like what I would call experts or B2B service providers online. So people who have an area of expertise and they want to leverage that again by serving other people's audiences and growing their own business with it. So I really help people with that, whether it be one-on-one coaching, which I do much less of nowadays, or I mostly do small group kind of mastermind settings where, because what I found over the years is my brain is valuable in some ways, but like the group think of being with really smart people in a group and led by me in a way that facilitates really good collaboration is kind of the magic. It's like we're the secret sauce to really unlocking quick, powerful growth for people in their marketing. So yeah, I agree. Marketing consultant, that's what I would have called myself in the past because I couldn't narrow it down. Now I basically
Yeah.
say I do strategic marketing for people with partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Well, I wanted to unpack partnerships. I know you've described it a little bit, but for folks who are less in the world of like, what an audience is, what does it look like
Yeah.
to, leverage someone's audience? Like, can you walk us through like what a promotion like that, what the kind of partnerships that you've set up? I mean, you could use, whether it be for Fire Creek or other things that you've done with members of the mastermind, that kind of thing. Would love to kind of just give some examples to fill it out a little bit for folks.
Yeah, 100%. I think at a high level, anyone listening, because this applies to local businesses, this applies to service businesses, it applies to online businesses, but the general idea here is a mindset around a win-win-win, meaning you as a business owner need to win. And in marketing, that means you're getting exposure to your ideal clients, your ideal customers, et cetera. So that's the win for you. And then there's this audience out there that you want to be in touch with. And so the win to them is education, inspiration, stories, et cetera. So you're serving them, though, you're giving them some great value without needing anything in exchange. And then this middle person, this connector, is basically the quote unquote owner of the aggregator of the audience, right? So someone who has influence over that audience, how do you give them a win? So a very simple example is exactly what we're doing right now, Dan. So a podcast is a
Yeah.
great example of partnerships. In the sense that I, as a guest, hopefully provide value. People are like, that's a good idea. That whole like mindset shift he gave me, that was a win for the audience. The win for you is you get fresh content, you get another episode in your current season, and you're getting more downloads as a result. I'm going to promote this episode. I'm going to give you a rating and review. So all the things I can do to help you, that's a win for you. And then the win for me is maybe there's someone listening and they're like, I'm in this time of transition. I really like this partnership idea and I want to talk to Dustin about his groups or about his one-on-one. And so maybe I get a client or maybe I just get some great relationships that turn into referral partners in the future. But that's like a very simple idea. Think of the podcast model. There's a guest, there's a host, and there's an audience. And if I can, as a guest, provide a win for all three of us, then everyone's happy at the end of the day. I'm not taking, it's all giving, and it's all in service. So it's of service, it's win-win-win, and it's basically relationship based. I think is a really simple way also to think about, like, where can I create a relationship that serves all three parties in that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I see, how it's works well with podcasts. I know you've done a lot with podcasts. I'm curious about more like, offline or local businesses. Like what are some examples of how partnerships have worked out, whether again for Fire Creek or for clients, just to give listeners another just way to be thinking about growing whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, so I'll talk about local. Before I do that, another just quick one for Fire Creek that's been huge for us is like subscription box placements. So you can think about that as a brand. We're looking for exposure to our ideal customers. For the subscription box, they need good products to put in there, often at a discount, so that their business model works. And then their audience loves discovering new, in our case, healthy, keto-friendly type of snacks. So that's another really simple partnership. On the local level, I actually just did some consulting with, I guess I won't say their name, but like one of the nation's largest painting franchises. And so they brought me in at a corporate level to work with their top 5 franchisees and say, how can we come up with a partnership marketing model that works on a local level for a service business? And so we've got multiple strategies that they're running through now and basically doing experiments with in their local communities. But at a local level, think of something as simple as a lunch and learn, right? So if I'm a painting contractor and I've got like this really cool system, and I know what the new trends are for interior design and decor or whatever, like if I have that area of expertise, so how can I use that to serve someone's audience? So maybe I line up a VIP social hour with handpick the best real estate agents, real estate brokerages, commercial property managers, the people who are my potential clients. They get invited to this great dinner, this great happy hour on my bill, and I get the opportunity then to meet them, to teach them, to maybe talk about how a great commercial painting increases property value and the amount of rent that you can charge. So that's, again, so think about this win-win-win. For me as the painting contractor, the win is exposure to like the VIP people in my community, because I'm a local business. I need the influence. And I would offer them also like some special referral bonus. So say, not for them, but for their, so say they're a real estate agent. I say, hey, if everyone that's moving into a new house, because those are my ideal clients, because the house is empty, it's super easy, I will give them a free pressure wash of their driveway, whatever, something that makes them look good. So for me, the win is new clients and great referral partners. For the real estate agent, the win is not only the free dinner and happy hour and education, but they get to raise their status because they have this special package that only invitation-only people get. And of course, their clients are super happy because they get the special bonus. They're getting hooked up with the premier painter in town. They don't have to think about hiring this service out. So that's top of mind because we just went through this.
Love it.
But yeah, there's that. There's things like vendor referral groups where you basically, if you're the captain in your community and you say, hey, I'm a painting guy, but I need relationships with the pest control, the lawn maintenance, whatever. Think of all these services around the home.
HVAC.
Let's form a collaboration and maybe do quarterly events where we bring our customers in and we educate them, entertain them, whatever. But it's basically a referral group that's done very purposefully and in a win-win-win situation. So it's never about taking, it's always about giving. And that's really the mindset. So we teach people and take them to and make this like a system in their business. And that part's important. But the real key is like the mindset shift that happens where you literally start seeing opportunities for partnerships everywhere. And it almost becomes overwhelming in a good way. Like it becomes very abundant once you kind of unlock that mindset.
I love that. And I love that you call it abundant. And because I know earlier you talked about just growing up with like a scarcity mindset. And I want to I'm going to put a pin in that. We'll circle back to it. But just while we're on this win-win-win concept, like what are the questions that someone should be asking to help identify, help find, make that mindset shift? I have some examples of my ideas, but I just want to throw that over the fence to you. And like, what are the questions they should be asking about what they're doing and who these people might be for them?
I think the first and foremost is who is your ideal customer, right? So you need to understand why you would want to do a partnership. And a big piece of that is who you want to talk to, right? So if you're wanting to sell Fire Creek snack sticks, you probably don't want to get on a vegan podcast, right? You may want to get on a keto podcast, or we're a gluten-free product. So one of our key avatars is like, we call them gluten-free moms, but like the people in the household who are buying for multiple people who get frustrated by the fact that there aren't good gluten-free options. So we have a great story to tell that audience. So it's like, who is your ideal audience? And then how can you serve them? And so it may be through education. Again, it may be through storytelling. It may be through kind of motivation, your personal story, something that they can kind of see out in front as an example of something they might want to follow. So once you know who you want to talk to and what you want to talk to them about, then you go identify those partners. So like, who has that audience? So in the podcast example, what are the podcasts that have people listening, a significant amount, that are gluten-free moms in our case, or keto athletes? And then that's like step one, is kind of figure out who you want to talk to, figuring out who has that audience. And then from there, there's of course how to approach them, how to develop a relationship, how to get them to say yes, and then how to actually do the thing of service to them. So that's why we go through this in a system and in a group. So it's not just a one-off thing, but that's the key thing. If anyone's thinking like, I don't know if this would really work for me, I almost guarantee it can work for you, but think about who you want to talk to and how can you be of service to them. And it could be, as simple as giving them a coupon code to someone. I mean, that's usually my call to action for Fire Creek on a podcast. But it turns into so much more, because the whole podcast is about the story behind the brand and like why I'm involved and why Ryan started it. And it's very emotional and compelling when I'm on shows talking about that Fire Creek experience.
Yeah, which is so great because then it's so much more than a meat stick, right? Like it's a
Right.
story that they're contributing to, and consuming doesn't mean it's a double meaning there, but like that they're getting to be a part of and getting to to support, which that makes a ton of sense. I know the answer to this question, but I just want to like just kind of play it out even more. Like, how did you get so good at this? How did where did this come from? Like when did partnerships, like when did this idea first like emerge for you?
So it turns out I was using it like from the very first days of engaged marriage. So one of the very first things I did in 2019, I started in October 2009, and by like January of 2010, I had, I don't know, several thousand people on my email list, and was already working on our first product. So it's a very quick start. And what I did though is when I entered the space, I went and saw like who had complementary kind of marriage and family topics, and I said, hey, let's do back in the day, this like ebooks were like the cool thing to do. So I said, let's do this collaborative ebook. I contributed very little of the content, but I basically collaborated and found partners that would want to collaborate and be in this ebook. And we gave it away for free as a lead magnet, but we all had rights to give it away for free as a lead magnet. And it was actually turned out to be a really cool product. It was called Love Every Day. I think it's probably still available somewhere as a PDF floating around the internet. But like, I don't know if you're familiar with Pat Flynn, the Smart Passive Income, huge podcast now. So like he was in there. Like this is like the early days, So I developed a relationship with him. Dan Miller, who's a New York Times bestselling author. And so like people I would never, now I'd be like, oh man, that was kind of crazy reaching out to these people. But at the time I was like, what do I have to lose? So I reached out and almost everyone said yes. They all contributed something cool. So anyway, so in hindsight, I've been doing this a lot, but for a long time. But where it became what I would call like a partnership marketing system is really about 2 years ago. So I was like many of the things that we innovate on, it was kind of a COVID-driven thing. Fire Creek we were heavily focused on retail and doing a lot of wholesale and doing trade shows. We were Walmart, like we had made a pretty big splash on the wholesale side. And then COVID happened, everything kind of stopped and dried up. And I was like, oh no, what are we going to do? And so we'd been doing e-commerce and growing, but it hadn't been our focus. So I basically just got on my first podcast in the summer of 2020, realized how much I enjoyed it, how the story really worked, got on another, and then like this kind of network effect takes off when you start doing this consistently, where it's not just the people listening, it's not just the relationship with the host, but like all these kind of people come out of the ether and they want to do brand collaborations, influencers. I talked about like marketing internships, all this stuff just started coming in to the point where like my whole network was people that heard me on podcast talking about meat sticks. And so I realized that this really worked. And so I did about 12 podcasts in that first half of, the second half of 2020. And then that's all this inbound stuff started coming in from people. How do you do this? And I realized that I accidentally kind of became really good at like pitching other podcasts and other partnerships, coming up with the right value proposition and stories, the right offers. And so I started working a lot of one-on-one. I had about 20 one-on-one clients that as I was like doing the thing and teaching the thing to them, I realized that it became repetitious. And my engineering kind of came up. I'm like, this is really a system.
There you go. Build the system.
So I developed it into a system. And so then then it allowed me to do small groups. And then I realized how good the small groups were. And so, so it's kind of, we started with like doing stuff and then kind of looking at it and realizing what worked and maybe what didn't work as well. And then doubling down on the stuff that worked. So I basically grew my primary business completely out of experimenting through Fire Creek and putting a system around what I was doing and getting success at.
I love it. And I just love how you just try stuff, found success, and then built a system, and then now that system has become a whole business in and of itself, which is just it's just incredible. How the progress. How you could never imagine that, right? You could never imagine what you're doing right now without.
3 years ago, I would have never guessed. So. And what's cool about it is, and if you do this right, what ends up happening in any business when you set this up right and you do it consistently is it kind of gets that flywheel effect, right? Like as you're doing the thing, it feeds itself, right? So like as I'm doing more partnership marketing, whether it be for Fire Creek or directly around partnership marketing for this coaching business, I'm doing it like in the public, and then so the interest continues to grow because I'm doing the thing and people can see how it works. So, so that's another thing we advocate is like how to make this a flywheel, not just like something you constantly have to work on. And then,
Yeah.
For people that get some success with it, we're all about like training a virtual assistant to do 80-90% of the work, where you basically show up, do the thing that you like to do, be a podcast guest as an example, and all the kind of back end stuff just happens once you do the upfront work, to make that feasible.
I love that. That's something I feel like I need to learn from you, because my experience with partnership stuff, affiliate stuff, is like it can be really good, but then like it feels like I feel like I'm always starting over, like I'm always starting from zero to get it going again, and so it's just ends up being a lot of work, even though it's not that much work, but like just like reaching out to people, making the conversations happen, all of that, like it just takes time and takes effort and organization that I'm not always that on top of. I'm curious.
We need to get you assistant doing most of that.
yes, I know. Well, we're going to talk more about that. I'm curious, and just because I know you, even with your current business, that you it's kind of word of mouth and growing, and this is just a kind of a selfish question, but I'm curious how do you what's your CRM like? How do you keep track of conversations? How do you how intentional are you with with those kinds of conversations? Like I know you and I are talking about implementing something like this for me, and then I know you're thinking about the open conversations that you're having, and I'm curious, how do you keep track of all of that?
So it's a great question. It's one I'm actually working through right now. Up to this point, honestly, a lot of what I've done is like yellow Post-it notes. It's like how I'm taking conversations, and then I translate those into like a journal or a Google Doc now. So it the evolution was like piles of yellow sticky notes, and then try to like download all that stuff at the end of the day or on a Friday. That has evolved into just simple Google Docs because they're searchable and it's a lot easier. And now I'm just like literally starting to use a tool called Pipedrive, which is basically a lead flow, lead pipeline. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And so I have my normal email list, just ActiveCampaign, and so these things talk to each other. So I'm able to broadcast emails and communicate that way. But a lot of this, like you said, is kind of hand-to-hand relationships. I wouldn't say combat, but it's hand-to-hand. It's individual one-on-one relationships in large part. And so, so like Pipedrive to me has been a really simple tool. I've tried like my engaged marriage brand. I use something called Entreport, which is a great tool. It's super robust, but like it's too robust for what I really need in this partnership marketing world. It's way lower volume, and it's way more high touch. And so I just need a simple way to be able to make sure I'm following up with people appropriately, making sure, like you said, you get these open loops of conversations, and that can kind of get overwhelming. And so my VA basically takes care of this stuff now that I've got it digitized. But I like to process things by writing hand notes. The key is to get that into a version that someone can help me with. So.
Yeah, I love that. That's super helpful. I'm working with Pipedrive right now, but I'm always like, just someone's just like learning how to adapt the tool, your process to the tool, and the tool to your process. And so I'm, thank you for indulging my selfish question there. I want to circle back to just the idea of mindset, because I know in my own life just how important that has been, and always, I think always will be, that you're always having to adjust and change the way you think about everything in order to level up your life, level up your business. I don't know, you've talked a little bit about scarcity and abundance, but I don't even know what the question is here, except I just want to hear you talk a little bit more about how you think about your own mindset and the people that you work with, and installing a new mindset, right? What is that process like?
How do you install a new mindset? It's a very good question. For me, it's got to be in habit. It's got to be part of a routine. So I've fallen out of this, maybe once a quarter, I'll realize like 5 days went by and I'm like, my mindset is not right. I need to recommit to a routine. So for me, that's a morning thing. And that's, for me, it's scripture, it's journaling, just very short amount of this sort of thing. And just really reflecting on gratitude. I think that's super helpful, because where I fall into a trap of scarcity and abundance is like, if one little thing goes wrong, it's like, it's easy for my mindset to go negative, right? But if I stop for 5 seconds and think about 3 things I'm really grateful for that way overcompensate for the one negative thing, like that gets me back to abundance. Also for me, I mean, selfishly, one of the reasons I love leading these mastermind groups is I can feed off other people's wins, right? So I think being in a group of like-minded, ambitious people, and for me, that's like mission-driven entrepreneurs is who I really like to work with. People who have a story to tell, people who have passion behind what they're doing, but also have some level of success. So being in that group, and whether I'm leading it or I'm a peer, you know, in these types of groups, like that's really, really powerful. And so I think if anyone listening is like, it doesn't have to be like a paid, you know, strategic kind of mastermind. Find a small group of peers that will commit to meeting on a regular basis, sharing your wins, asking for help when you need it. Like, I think that's a huge thing. So I'd say morning routine, exercise are really important. Obviously, the things you're consuming from media, like, you know, Dan's podcast is always going to be a positive thing, right? So feed yourself with that, not with negative media stuff. And then I think getting plugged into a mastermind group or something similar where you have a regular cadence of celebrating your own wins and recognizing and helping other people. Because I think when you serve other people, like that's really what feeds the positive mindset for me.
I love that. Such a great answer. Thank you for that. And I think it's just so true that like whatever you're consuming, whether it's the stories of the people that you're hearing, or like the news, like is it creating negative feelings of scarcity and you know, fear, or is it creating the opposite, you know, good feelings, positive gratitude and abundance? And I think it's such a good way to think about it. Putting yourself in those places where you're with those people, making sure you're consuming the right kind of media. So yeah, that's so good. I know in my own life, it's an ongoing. I don't want to say struggle because that feels like too negative, right? Here we're already doing it right now, right? It's about mindset. It's not a struggle. It's an ongoing process. So again, right there, I just reframed it. I'm doing it right now in real time.
Your words matter, and all that self-talk. I mean, it does matter. And we all, and I think one of the things, especially like as entrepreneurs, because everything we do is kind of variable, you know, like no day is really the same. I think it's really easy to look at other people's highlights, you know, on their social media and stuff, and think that they're not having these negative moments, these negative thoughts, and everyone does. Like for sure, everyone does. And again, you kind of, when you get with a group that you get enough intimacy, like in these mastermind groups, after I'd say like 3 or 4 weeks, there's enough trust and intimacy built up because people have shared enough and they've been vulnerable enough that like it's magic. It really is. It's like, wow, like I had you on this pedestal and you're like a person, like you're human. Like you actually deal with insecurities and fears, and you wake up at 2 a.m. thinking negative thoughts, and like we all do. And so how do you combat that? How do you deal with that is going to result in an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And yeah, for me, I have a lot of like deep stuff. You know, I grew up with all of that scarcity. My dad passed away. My mom is still very scarcity minded. So even like I love my mom and I'll talk to her, but like I have to be pretty firm and like I'm not absorbing that energy. You know, like I want to tell her how great of a vacation we had, and she'll be like, "Did anyone get COVID? Like, did anyone? You know, did you have any near misses of car wrecks?" I'm like, "What do you think so scarce?" You know, like, no, we had an awesome time. So yeah, it's funny that how that, you know, your family of origin. We talk about a lot of that stuff in the marriage world. Like it really matters, and it's going to be a lifelong thing that you have to commit to reprogramming and looking at things in a different way.
I love that. So good. We could go on about that for so long. There's so many layers to it, but we'll have to save that for another time because they're coming up on our time here. This has just been so fun, Dustin. For folks that want to follow along with the work that you're doing, do you have anything that you'd like to invite folks to?
Yeah, I mean, just come over to simplesuccesscoaching.com. And so I'm really big, again, leading with value. So I do strategy sessions with people. We'll come up with a 90-day marketing plan for their business. That's all free of charge. And then if they're like, hey, I want help with that, then I'll tell them about the groups and the other programs and things that we have. But very much all about hearing from really cool, ambitious people and developing relationships. So if anyone's listening, go to simplesuccesscoaching.com, sign up there. I'd love to have a great conversation with your listeners.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dustin. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to chatting more soon.
Absolutely, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dustin, so much. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in. You can find links to Dustin's work at themeaningmovement.com/Dustin, DUSTIN. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. Leave us a comment. Would love to hear what's resonating with you about this show. I also want to ask you a favor. If you know someone who would benefit from these kinds of conversations, take a quick moment, and send them a text, an email, give them a call, and say, hey, I was listening to this podcast. This host did this weird thing where he asked me to do something at the end, and this is me doing it. Would you like to listen? And who knows, they might enjoy the show just as much as you do. It would mean the world to me. Our artwork is by Eliezer Ruiz. Our music is by Tom Roram. We'll be back with you in just a few days. Thanks so much.